on, dip my body in glitter. Platform sneakers, all the boys want a picture. Two foreign cars, I make rich look richer. Save your breath, baby, I'm not going home with ya. Mini skirt on, dip my body in glitter. Platform sneakers, all the boys want a picture. Two foreign cars, I make rich look richer. Save your breath, baby, I'm not going home with ya. Mini skirt on. Two foreign cars, I make rich look richer. Save your breath, baby, I'm not going home with ya. Mini skirt on, dip my body in glitter. Platform sneakers, all the boys want a picture. Two foreign cars, I make rich look richer. Save your breath, baby, I'm not going home with ya. Mini skirt on. Two foreign cars, I make rich look richer. Save your breath, baby, I'm not going home with ya. Mini skirt on. Two foreign cars, I make rich look richer. Save your breath, baby, I'm not going home with ya.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Okay. We should be good. All right. Welcome, guys, to our stream today. So today, we wanted to do a kind of special stream going on where we wanted to talk about the Beyblade World Cup, the Beyblade World Championship that we are going to be a part of. We are a part of the regionals. My wife is giving me a hand sign wave.
I'm still not.
Not hearing anything? You should be hearing things. Your headset might not be on.
Off now.
There we go. Okay, so we are looking to talk about this World Championship. We were the regional hosts for Texas, and the whole thing went really well. Lots of competitors are going on.
Can't actually see the sign behind.
No, I mean, it is, you can see it on TikTok. TikTok gets
okay.
that. Okay. Yes, I'm aware the other people can't see it. So, we are doing really well. We had the tournament come along. It went great. And now we went and we looked up how did it go exactly. And so we created this. We went through and we found, if you're on TikTok, we got this going on the YTs to see the actual spreadsheet, but I'll talk about it. We created a spreadsheet where we went through all the details on each of the different regional events for the World Beyblade organization for this Beyblade World Cup. So you have to report your regional event results. And we went through, we created a spreadsheet that went on all of this. I would show it on here, but my studio thing doesn't work yet. So we've got all the details on what kind of Beyblades that you should expect to see based off of who played what in their regionals and what kind of the different regionals do. What you might not be aware of when talking about competitive Beyblade is each scene in different provinces, different states, different countries sees a very different result set from what Beyblades are used, what combos are used, who's showing up, and how good those bladers are at different things. And so we are seeing the results of that here in which we've created this spreadsheet. So we saw that there were about 19 instances of Guilty being in somebody's deck. We saw that there were 15 instances of Dynamite or Devil plus F. We saw 11 instances of Wind, 10 instances of Vanish, and then it did a hard drop down from Vanish down to Burst. So Vanish had 10, Burst is 4. So the top 4 most common combinations that you're seeing are so much more prevalent than anything else. So that's a very interesting thing. If you're going to be going into these Beyblade competitive scenes, you're going to want to make sure that you understand what you're going to be seeing, what you're going to be running into. You're extremely likely to run into Guilty, Dynamite, Wind, and Vanish. You are double the likelihood, triple the likelihood of seeing one of those 4 combinations to anything else. So can the deck that you are building handle all 4 of those beys? You're going to be designing your deck around being able to fight as many opponents as you possibly can, and you can't guarantee you're going to fight certain opponents. With this mindset, you're going to have to make sure that you're going to be able to handle the most common things, as well as be able to take in surprise from certain adversaries. And so I kind of created this system here in which you're going to talk about what decks you're going to be building and how you're going to build those decks. So there are currently 4 kind of main decks that we see people build. The main deck style is right spin stam, left spin stam, attack. So that combination is going to be all about making a very reliable either right or left spinner that can fight almost anything. This combination is usually going to be something, if we're talking about our beys here, we're going to look at things like you're going to have Guilty, that's going to be your attacker. So if you got a Guilty Longinus here, that's the most likely going to be the attacker that you're going to see in a stam attack deck. And then you're going to have a left spinner and a right spinner for your stam types. So we've got ourselves Vanish Achilles, which is one that you're going to see a lot. Vanish Achilles on Illegal and Bearing Drift is very common. You might also see it on Bearing or on something like Zeal, but it's going to be a combination you're going to see a lot of. Vanish Achilles, Vanish Helios, you might see Vanish Spriggan. There's lots of combinations, but it's going to be Vanish something. And this is a left spinner with soft rubber. You got to be able to reliably fight this. As we can see, most decks have this combination somewhere in it, and you need to be able to handle that. Next to that is going to be something like a Wind. So here we've got Wind Perseus. Again, Wind Perseus you're going to see pretty often on Illegal and on Bearing Dash. So both these combinations are going to, one of these two is likely going to be in the deck, and they're going to be Illegal and Bearing Drift. After you have these two, then the other one is going to be slightly weaker. So you have one built to handle everything, and you have the other one built to exclusively handle what the first one can't. So if you built a combination that cannot beat a right spinning stamina type, your other combo is built to defeat those right spinning stamina types. And the reason you build it that way is because of deck format in the reactionary setup. If they beat you, they have to pick first. You react to what they've picked, and then you go forward and you can pick which Beyblade will react to their combination. We saw a lot of interesting things here. If we go back to our sheet, and on the sheet, we noticed a lot of patterns from a lot of regions. So like if we are checking out the Washington region that we got details on, we can see Wind is very prevalent. We've got Wind and Burst. Both of these, this is a very unique to this meta. So the Washington meta uses Burst. And so we got that going on here. We got ourselves a Burst. It is Burst Bahamut. Oftentimes on something like Moon or Over, and then on some kind of drift driver, Metal Drift, Bearing Drift, all sorts of drift options handle here, and this is something that you're going to see a lot coming out of that Washington region. And so Washington was using that, and we can see that Burst was in all three of their, three of their four, I think. 3 of the top 4 were using Burst in their combinations. So we saw some Burst Perseus, some Burst Achilles, very interesting from that region. We also saw a lot of Vanish, almost everybody was running Vanish, and then Wind. Where if you look over at the Texas region, Wind does not exist. Nobody in the Texas region uses Wind. And so we had to kind of analyze and think about why is it that Texas does not find Wind particularly viable? Why is Wind not at all seen by any of the competitors? It didn't even show up in the competition list in that tournament for the Texas regionals. And instead we saw Dynamite plus F take that spot. Dynamite plus F is used and is very similar to Wind in its design and in its setup, and we saw this combination way more often. Different cores, so we saw Belial's, we saw Perseus's, there's lots of options here. Kerbeus could go into the core here. We saw a lot of that, but we did not at all see Wind. And so if you're fighting someone from Texas, your deck might not need to be able to fight wind. We saw also in Maryland, there was very interesting. If you look down this list, Maryland has World. World is in all 3 of the Bladers decks from Maryland. So that is going back to the Sparking generation. And we've got something like World Spriggan, World Diabolos, World Fafnir, which is a counter to spinners. So you, of course, put it on a bearing-style driver and then with wheel. Almost everybody exclusively used 1S as the chassis. We used wheel and then drift. We saw this almost exclusively from Maryland. We did also see this in Texas. Texas uses this quite a bit, and the reason Texas uses this quite a bit is because I use this, and other people in Texas saw how useful this was and started using it to beat out some of the other competitors. The very powerful thing about this is that if you have somebody in your meta that does not run left spinners, this combination absolutely destroys them. If all 3 of their Beyblades in their deck are right spin, this thing's going to dominate. And so we're seeing that is likely something that comes out of Maryland as well. Maryland has found the same situation where decks really need something like a World Spriggan to get those last second wins against long duration stamina beys. It was very interesting as we went through this and we learned a lot about the different combinations, about things like over in Toronto. Toronto is considered, some of the best bladers considered to be in North America are in the Toronto scene. And so up in Toronto, we noticed that there was Barricade. And Barricade showed up in the Toronto scene and did not show up in anybody else's scene. So we do have that here to talk a little bit about, and that is Barricade counters out left spinners. And it's obvious Toronto has found left spinners are so prevalent that everybody put a Barricade in their Toronto deck. So why are other regions not finding that? Is Vanish and Guilty not as common in other regions? Well, we didn't see that. We saw both Vanish and Guilty all over the place, but nobody reacted with Barricade except Toronto. And so why did Toronto find the need to go to this? Where did that meta come from? So if you're going to this World Championship, you have to not only be able to handle your region and what you're used to being able to interact with, but you also have to be able to look at what's out there and what's constantly being used by other regions. If you're not ready for that, you're going to get surprised by something that could absolutely decimate you. So let's go back to talking about that whiteboard there. So we've got the right spin, left spin attack. This is 80% of decks have this. Hello, Danny. Thanks for coming by. As well as thanks, Mark, for joining us over on the YT. Right spin, left spin, stamina with an attack is the most common combination. We're going to see that combination used by most people. The next most common that we see is in response to that, and that is a right spin, left spin defense. Right spin, left spin defense is a combination that reacts to that right spin, left spin attack, and it's for bladers that are not confident in their attack potential. That's bladers like me. Honestly, my deck should not have an attacker in it because I'm bad at attack types. And you will see it in my content if you go through and watch my videos. I'm bad at launching attackers, and I often end up getting myself wrecked if I try to use one because I launch it poorly, and either I don't get that knockout and I get spun out, or I KO myself. And there's a big joke in my region in which I lost a battle with a Guilty Longinus on Metal Extreme. I lost to a stock Hasbro Poison Cobra, launched by, I think it was an 8-year-old, if not younger, because I launched myself out of the arena and lost that matchup. That was in pick 3, choose 1, so I was locked into that attacker and I just couldn't make it work. So I should run a right spin stam, left spin stam defense. That would be the best combination for me to run. I can react to people's attackers with my defender while still having the right spin, left spin stam. The problem with right spin, left spin defense is that you have no way with this deck to get back ahead. If you ended up getting to the point that you are behind, so if you're playing in your tournament and you ended up losing the first match and then tying the second match, in right spin, left spin defense, you end up not being able to get ahead again. You can't do anything to get yourself bumped up to the point that you're winning. And you'll often find that you will get beat and you'll tie them out, and you'll get beat and you tie them out if they got ahead first. And there's not a lot this deck can do to get past them if you end up in that pattern. And that's definitely the struggle with right spin, left spin defense, and why right spin, left spin attack is way more common. In right spin, left spin attack, we see that the attacker is used to say, I'm behind right now, and I don't see a way for me to get ahead using my stamina Beyblades. I'm either going to tie them, or they're going to beat me, is what you end up running into. And then you pull out that attacker, and you use that attacker to get extra points. And you try and use that for knockouts or for bursts, and to get yourself ahead. That's why it's the most common combination, and really you should practice this. In my opinion, this is the best deck setup. It's either right spin, left spin attack, or left spin stam, right spin defense attack. Is another variation on this, but not nearly as common. The next most common setup that we run into here is going to be right spin, left spin, and then another stamina, usually another right spinner. And so what this deck format uses is that it uses something like wind or dynamite. Dynamite plus F or wind ends up in this combination as your primary Beyblade. And the point of picking this one in your combination is to say, this should beat almost anything thrown at it. There's a handful of things that can beat this combo. And so you throw that out first, and that's what you use every time you don't know what your opponent is going to pick. Then, to react to that, you have two other beys in your deck. You would have something like a World Spriggan, and you would have something like an Astral. And you would use these two combinations, one left spin and one right spin, and you'd have them completely set up to beat the opposite spin direction. And so your right spinner is built to beat left spinners, and your left spinner is built to beat right spinners. And the purpose of this is to say, whenever your opponent picks something and you know they're going to pick it, so in deck format, if they won the last match, they go first, and they pick something, you react with which one of these you need to be able to beat them. And you'll beat them every time because you built that Beyblade to always beat opposite spinning. Then once you get the win, you throw out a Dynamite plus F, and that Dynamite plus F goes out into the arena and is very hard to defeat. And the purpose of it is that whenever you throw this thing out, it should be a tie, or it should be a win for you, and then you have to react with the other ones, and it's a really strong build. So left spin, right spin, left spin, right spin stamina combinations. Building this, the risk of it is that if you get too far behind, you don't have any way to get ahead, and then you end up just getting absolutely spun out. I've seen this a lot. These guys that run this are running it a little bit too safe. They're taking it a little bit too back, and when you run it that way, you end up having difficulty getting ahead. The last combo that we see, this combo will not win this tournament. We're not going to see this combo winning in the BWC, but you are going to see this combo. You are going to have to fight this combo, and you're going to have to beat this combo. And this is stam, any stam. It's either right spin or left spin, and it comes with a right spin attacker and a left spin attacker. These are very confident players in their attack capabilities, and they believe they can knock anything out. These guys are kind of like hot shots. They come in, I see them all the time. They are very good at attacking, but unfortunately attack is just a little bit too unreliable. And because of how much weight they put in their capabilities of beating you with an attacker, they do all right. They end up as kind of like a upsetter. They will take out high-ranking players. They'll take out like some of the best. And this kind of leads to an analogy to poker. You see this a lot in poker where world championships in poker say, I hate playing a player that doesn't know how to play poker. And a world champion can get knocked out of a poker competition because they fight someone that doesn't know how to control the game. And that's what people that run double attacker tend to be. They tend to be bladers that don't understand the little intricate details of Beyblade, and they just fall back to or require high speed, high damage attackers to get them those wins. We see these bladers show up, they upset, they eliminate someone from the competition, and then eventually they lose out and they never make it very far in the competition. But you're still going to run into them, and your deck needs to be able to handle them. So we want to talk about all those kind of combinations and whatnot, and so we did throw together a whole thing here on the board. Look here. My wife just sending me so many nice gifts. So we got all these combinations here that we built to talk about what we're running into a lot, and as well as talk about what you need to do to react to these. So when you're fighting an opponent that runs something like this is World Spriggan. So World Spriggan is oftentimes a left spin. It's sometimes a right spin, but it's more often used in left spin stamina combination that's usually designed to beat out your wind or your dynamite. It is extremely weak to guilty. And if you're noticing your opponent's deck has this, the problem that you're going to run into with this bay is that, or fighting this bay, is that if you win, you then have to pick first. And if you pick your wind or your dynamite, they are going to react with a World Spriggan. If you pick any right spinner, they're going to react with World Spriggan, because World Spriggan can beat every right spinner. So if you see this bay in your opponent's deck, you need to pick first your left spinning attacker if you have it. So Guilty needs to be your first pick. If you are first picking Guilty when you have just won the previous match, they cannot react with World Spriggan or World Diabolos or anything. This thing will burst into pieces and it will get torn apart. So when you're in deck format and you're fighting somebody that has this Beyblade in your combination, you cannot pick first a left or a right spinning stamina or whatever is the opposite spin direction to their Spriggan, and you'll have to figure that out when you're fighting them. Being able to take that out is going to be very important to that combination, and this is a very weak bay to anything other than what it's built to fight. If you're losing to someone that is beating you out with like a Wind Perseus kind of combo, a Wind anything on Bearing Drift, or a Dynamite plus F on Bearing Drift, if you're losing with your reliable right spin stamina to this, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. And that's because they're going to be able to go to this anytime you're throwing out your reliable pick. And that's, again, kind of the problem when it leads into these kind of combinations, is that your deck format has to be, you have a reliable pick that should be able to beat everything, you have something that beats the absolute counter to your reliable pick, and then you have a wild card. And if you're relying too much on your wild card, you're going to lose out of the tournament. And if your reliable pick cannot stand a chance against your opponent's reliable pick, you're going to get eliminated. That's why I actually ended up not winning the local Texas regional, and that was because my Dynamite plus F Perseus was not able to defeat my opponents. We both used the same build. We both used Dynamite plus F Perseus, but on Bearing Drift, illegal, we had an exact mirror match. You actually had to pick up the bays and look at them to figure out whose was whose. But theirs beat mine every time by a lot. And that means there's some kind of issue with my Bearing Drift compared to theirs. They had a more reliable Bearing Drift, and that's the only answer there, because there was no wear differences, there was no combination differences. We were both pulling reliably hard. Oftentimes, it even seemed like mine was going faster, but their Bearing Drift worked out better. And so, when I got into that scenario, I didn't really have a way to win because of the way I build my deck. I tried to attack them out, but I am not good enough at attackers, and I ended up getting eliminated. So knowing your weakness there is going to be very important when you're coming into these, and you need to be able to build a deck that can react to that. I think the hardest part is going to be the fact that you have to have a deck set up to fight the person you're fighting, and you don't know what their deck is gonna be like ahead of time, and that is always the struggle of building these decks, especially if you're going to build something that has a defense type in it. If I were to try and build attack defense, I would have still lost my tournament because my defense type probably also would have been a right spinner. I would have used something like Prominence. And that's because the left spin defense meta doesn't have any good options, in my opinion. Your only good option of left spinning defense is going to be Vanish and something like Vanish Achilles, but you're going to be putting this as your left spin stamina most likely because it's just so much more dominant in the stamina meta than it is in the attack meta. I already had mine in my deck like that, and so if I were to run a second defender, I don't know what left spin defender I could use, and if a left spin defender could even beat something like Wind or Dynamite. Definitely a struggle. But let's get to talking about this sheet, because the sheet's important. And really what we want to do. We're thinking about trying to set this up, so let us know in comments, just right now live, if you would be interested in us setting up a accessible spreadsheet similar to the one we got here that's going to go into more details, more graphs and whatnot of information on what is currently going on in the meta. We'd be interested in taking on the winning combinations from different tournaments, plugging it into a sheet that'll tell us more and more information on what's happening in Beyblade. We're especially interested in doing that as Beyblade X comes along. Of course, the new generation of Beyblade will be releasing in July, and we're going to be on top of that, trying to be active members in the Beyblade X scene, and we might set up something like this that starts to track how the Beyblade X meta evolves and be able to follow it along. Yeah, for sure, Mark. Not all bearing drifts are equal. There's a lot of bearing drifts that are way behind others. I think bearing drift is probably one of the parts that we've seen the most variation in. Either bearing drift or quattro. Quattro we see a huge amount of variation in, but bearing drift, it's really unfortunate because it's the best part, but you almost have to buy multiples of the set, and I have 2 bearing drifts, and neither of mine are as good as one of our local bladers bearing drift is. I can't beat him no matter what combination. And if we swap, if I take his blade and he takes mine, his still wins. So there's something about his parts that are just better than my parts. It's very unfortunate. The things that really surprised us the most as we looked into this combination was the barricade from Toronto. Barricade, a lot of people talk about it and how it is garbage, how it's no good and you shouldn't use it. Barricade is really good at countering left spinners, but a lot of people felt like it wasn't able to handle guilty. And if you can't handle guilty, what's the point in bringing a right spin defender kind of Beyblade? But we've found that with certain changes to the meta, especially putting it on Zeal, we see a lot on Giga, it's on Zeal, it's on Mobius Dash, or Mobius Drift, it ends up still being really good. So it almost stock combo, it can be really reliable against your left spinners, and so we're seeing that a lot, and your deck needs to be able to handle this if you're going to WBO, the WBC, because you're going to see this. Chances are, like, if we look at the names that we're running Barricade, we've got Dan, Henwuja, and Zenki, all from Toronto using it. Those are some top bladers in the world. Those are very skilled bladers. They are going to go far in the tournament. Almost everyone is going to be fighting one of those people in this setup at the BWC. And so if you're not ready to handle their Barricade, they're going to get the win. If that is a surprise that you don't have an answer to, they're going to beat you. And being ready for that is very important. The other interesting thing we saw was that burst. I did not think burst was very good. All my work through with burst, I have never seen it very effective, but we saw it is... people feel differently from me, especially that Washington area. We see it on Exceed Dash plus Z, which is an attacker. So we see a Burst Perseus over Exceed Dash plus Z from Wizard Spryzen. We know Wizard Spryzen is going to the Dark Horseman event, or is at least invited to the Dark Horseman event. Zector there is also using Burst. Burst Achilles Moon Metal Drift. So that's what I built this one off of. I used Bahamut here instead of Achilles. I think it would probably end up being better. They used Bahamut, I believe, separately. Oh, they didn't use Bahamut at all. They didn't use Bahamut at all, but I think it might be a little bit better than Achilles. We'll see. This combination, it could be right spin as well. I didn't think about that. I don't know what spin direction they use for that, and that is the tricky thing about this, especially if you're using Achilles. Spin direction you can control, and that might have been something of the reason that they ended up going that route. On Metal Drift, this thing is going to be a stamina killer. It'll wipe out its opposite spin combination every time. Unless your opposite spin combination is Astral, and we found that in our testing. When we went up Burst versus Astral, and Burst is supposed to be kind of the upgrade to Astral. We did not find any combination, if they were built identically, we did build them both with the exact same combos. Astral beat Burst every time, in both same spin direction and opposite spin direction, regardless of which one was spinning in which direction. So that was a very interesting thing to see come up, but we're not seeing Astral as good against everything else. And people are starting to find that Burst must be reliable. If we're seeing that come out of the Washington district, the Washington Bladers are fantastic. Zector, Wizard Spryzen, they're top-end Bladers. We know they're really good Beyblade players, and we are going to have to be able to react to that. I am not particularly familiar with the California meta, but we can look here and we can see what's going on out of California. I hadn't really heard of any of these bladers. Atlas, Lord Grim, Grim Reaper. Finally, lots of Grim going on over there. We had not heard about them until we read their kind of results here. And we're seeing, okay, so there's guilties, lots of guilties. They are the only ones to have Xiphoid come into the fray. No, there's 2 Xiphoids, I think. So they had a Xiphoid, this exact Xiphoid, Xanthus and Extreme Dash, as their attacker for one of their bladers. So their 3rd place blader came in the combination with this. We don't see this very often because it is not considered to be a particularly reliable attacker. Its top potential is higher than guilty. I think if you are playing this thing perfectly and it hits right and it does everything that it's supposed to do, try to get that on the camera, this thing is going to beat out guilty if you do that. But the problem is you can't do that every time, and it has lower lows and higher highs than guilty. And because of that, the reliability of comparison, we end up seeing guilty way more often. But this is something that, again, you're going to see, you're going to end up against. I think this combo is better at fighting Dynamite F and Wind. Both Wind and Dynamite F are going to lose to this more often than they will lose to Guilty. But Vanish is going to beat this almost every time. I don't see this beating Vanish very often. And that's because of the general design of this, plus the right spin potential. Vanish is just built to handle that. And so, if this is the attacker and you have a Vanish built deck, you should be safe. I do think we're going to see Vanish built decks are going to be the most common decks coming out of this tournament. We're going to see the most people have this combination right here. And this combination is going to be Vanish, Achilles, Illegal, Bearing Drift on 0. You're going to see this combination more than you're going to see anything else. It is the most reliable first throwout. It doesn't have very many things that counter it. The right spin stamina meta in pure right spin potential isn't that strong. World isn't as strong in right spin. Astral isn't as strong in right spin. But Burst might be. I don't know about that. Burst might be able to beat this, and that again might be why Burst is showing up in that meta, is because this is going to be the most common thing that you're going to see, and you might end up getting wrecked by it. The only other attacker we're going to see Guilty, we're going to see Xiphoid, and you're guaranteed you're going to see an occasional ultimate. Ultimate, Belial 3, Fortress, Extreme Dash. You're going to see this occasionally. We did not see it throughout this setup. I think we found it only was used once. As we went through all these details, there was an ultimate on Exceed Dash. And Legacy. That's interesting. So Indiana had an ultimate Valkyrie 2, Legacy, Extreme Dash, Exceed Dash plus Z. That's almost stock. The only change there is the Exceed Dash plus Z. I'm very, very surprised to have seen that. There was another one, though. We saw a second ultimate. Yeah, there it is. So this is the one that I expected. Ultimate Belial 3 over Extreme Dash 3. We saw that out of Maryland. So Ultimate will show up. It won't be nearly as common. It's going to be a third most common attacker, but it's going to be significantly lower than Guilty. And I think Burst. I think we saw more Burst attackers than we saw Ultimate attackers in the list of people that win. You might see a Savior. I think you'll see at least one Savior. I know of a Blader that's going to be WC and is going to use Savior as their attacker. So you might end up seeing that, but not 100% sure. We didn't see any here. We looked at all the winners here, and we didn't end up seeing from the top 3s. But there are plenty of Bladers that are going to be going to the BWC that did not make it into the top 3 of their local event. They might have gotten eliminated early, things like that will have happened. I'd get interested in your thoughts. Anybody listening here, is there details that you want to get out of the spreadsheet that we can look at now, or that we could build the spreadsheet up to be able to handle more of this information more often? I think we are compiling a very useful set of information that could help Bladers figure out how to get into this, as well as how to build your decks to react to what you're going to end up seeing from these tournament sets. So I'd love to hear ideas from you guys. I don't think there's anything too surprising that we saw, other than what I've already brought up with the Burst. So a lot of solid combinations, a lot of builds. I am probably going to be bringing my World Spriggan, but it's not going to be in every deck. I'm going to have a deck set up probably I'm going to bring, I think, 8-ish Beyblades in my deck. And I'm going to have, this will be in it. I will probably have my Dynamite plus F combination. I don't feel wind is there. I might have to test it more. We got time. We are going to be going there in June, so we got about 2 months now to test this out. I have never found wind to be able to beat Dynamite plus F. So we definitely need to check that out, learn about that, and see if that is a combination that I can beat with my deck. I think I'm definitely going to be bringing a Perseus combination, and I'm especially going to be bringing this if I'm starting to see a lot of attackers and a lot of really skilled attackers. In my local meta, there's one pretty skilled attacker. There's one guy that's decent at attackers but doesn't have the confidence level in his attack, and then everybody else in the Texas meta, they bring attackers in their deck and they never pick them. It is always their constant switch between their 2 stamina Beyblades. They only go to the attacker when they're desperate. I don't see that out of other regions. I've seen results out of regions like out of Toronto, where we see the attacker used way more often. And I think that might be part of the reason why we're seeing wind prop up in popularity in other districts, is that Dynamite plus F, I think, is a little bit weaker to attackers than wind is. And so again, if you're not used to dealing with high skill attackers and high confidence attackers, wind might not be one that is something you're very used to interacting with. And so you're going to see it, you're going to have to beat it. You might surprise people. I think we're going to find that a lot of these bladers that are very renowned in their local meta are going to get surprised as they come up to this meta, because again, there's not a lot of people looking at all the different metas in all the different areas and going, can my combination beat everything that's seen there? And I think we see that a lot because we do see people moving from districts. We see people in Maryland fighting the crew in Toronto every once in a while and in North Carolina every once in a while. And when we see that, there's always upsets. And that's the biggest thing about meta comparison, meta analysis, and having the idea of what you're doing here and how to handle it. Yeah. I don't know if I have much else on this particular topic. So what we're going to do is that we're going to move the TikTok stream over there, and we're probably going to do some quick battles. And we will pause and restart the YouTube stream, moving over to our battle area in just a moment. So YouTube, give us about 5 minutes to get that set up. Both of you, give everybody 5 minutes. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break here, and we're going to restart the streams for some battles, and we'll do our regular about hour worth of battles coming up. Thanks, guys.